fever. And it was straight to the bunker. Protocol, they said. But the planet was half dead already. Hundreds of punchers, trackers, grunts, and thieves. The desperate and the damned, all looking for a cut. Same old story. The price of fresh pulled old growth sap had spiked again. Even with a war on, the Ojatari woodnuts were still buying by the barrel. So crews were going further out, offering more, grabbing what they could. Who knows what they saw in me? I'm not the kind to amount to much. Maybe that was the point. The first run was Deep Wood. Hazard crew, double credit. Yeah, I took the job. Ever step on a new planet, breathe new air. You'd think it does something, cracks open your mind, rewires your hardware. We were in it for the money, yeah, but you don't touch the edge just for credit. A new ident, a new reason, a new friend. But a planet can't keep a promise. It's just another rock. The forest, though. The forest.
Says the Biggins is just behind this bend. It's bigger than the pictures.
The trees weren't just trees, you know? Not like the bunker tablets. They had an odor, a presence. They breathed like they was alive, watching us, knew what we were gonna do. So why didn't they stop us? With that age, that power. Unlike the punch burns in my crew, I'd read the brief. Poison crats, nimble dodgers, a dozen ways to die, and even more to kill.
That's the one, yeah.
Maybe knowing was judgment enough, but when the time came, we tied our tappers up, and we sucked the ancients dry. A few weeks in, hunger spread through camp. Not rations, though those got short enough. No, there's a different kind of hunger. One you only get off planet, outer rim. The closer to the edge you get, the more you want to taste it. You can't blame a man for madness, can you? It's in our nature, I think, to try things, explore. The saying, don't build spaceships. They don't get to see what we see. But maybe that's the problem. Never should have looked up in the first place. They left at night, one by one, bound for Deep Wood. Few came back. Ones that did less sane than before. Ain't nothing like it, they'd say. Not a word to describe. Didn't matter. Soon, the hunger had me too. Had to taste the madness for myself. Don't know how long I walked. Hours, maybe. Days. The trees, they talked to me. Whispered secrets. Invited me to stop and sip, but none of them were right. I kept walking till I saw it. Her. sap touched my lips, the world went black. I wasn't there anymore. I wasn't me. But I was somewhere. Something. A seed in the hand of a stranger. A spark of life for a dead moon. I stretched my roots across continents, across lifetimes, until a barren rock became a paradise. Until the humans had forgotten that a debt was owed. While they worshipped their own gods, I watched and grew. I climbed their tallest towers, ensnared what they held dear. And while they rested on my achievement, I took back what was rightfully mine. Their fires burned hot on my skin, and their bombs tore my body limb from limb. But in their haste to destroy me, the humans destroyed themselves.
Pakistan's well-known writer and social activist Syed Naseem Haidari was traveling to Afghanistan to attend. His schedule was packed, leaving almost no time to relax. It wasn't his first visit to the country, so the journey felt familiar, but one thing always stood out to him. The people of Afghanistan welcomed him with genuine warmth and respect. Every time he arrived, he was treated like an honored guest, and those heartfelt moments left a lasting impression on him. This visit, however, was especially meaningful. The conference had invited experts from several countries, making it one of the largest gatherings of its kind. Naseem Haidari had been asked to speak on an important topic, and the event carried a great deal of significance. As he prepared himself for the discussions ahead, he had no idea that this journey would soon unfold into an experience far more unforgettable than the conference itself. Just as the trip was about to begin, his close friend looked at him with concern and said, "Naseem, promise me one thing. You'll stay careful, won't you?" Dear readers, as I sat down in a hotel in Kabul early one morning, I found myself thinking deeply. Before I could gather my thoughts, someone knocked on my door. A hotel staff member stood outside with an urgent expression. "Sir, salam. A telephone call has come through for you." For a brief moment, I wondered who could possibly be calling me here. Hardly anyone knew where I was staying, and only a handful of people even knew I had traveled to Kabul. The thought lingered in my mind as I walked toward the phone, trying to guess who it might be. On the other end of the line, a familiar voice greeted me with warmth. "So you finally arrived in Kabul. I knew you wouldn't tell me where you were staying, but I managed to track you down anyway." A smile crossed my face as I instantly recognized the caller. His voice carried the confidence of someone who always seemed to know more than anyone else. It was clear he had a reason for calling, and something about his tone made me realize this conversation was about to lead me into an unexpected turn of events. "Come over," he said. "I need to see you." "Right now?" "Yes, immediately." The urgency in his voice caught my attention. He wasn't the type of person to make unnecessary requests, and if he was calling me this early, it had to be something important. I quickly got ready and stepped outside into the cool morning air. The streets were just beginning to wake up. The city still carried the quiet calm of dawn as I made my way toward the location he had given me. A car was already waiting, exactly as he had promised. Without wasting another moment, I climbed inside. The drive through the city was silent. We passed government buildings, crowded intersections slowly filling with traffic, and neighborhoods where shopkeepers were just opening their doors for the day. Although the city appeared peaceful, there was an unspoken tension in the atmosphere, as if everyone sensed that uncertainty was never too far away. After some time, the car stopped in front of an elegant residence surrounded by high walls and guarded gates. A security officer confirmed my identity before allowing me inside. As I walked through the entrance, I realized this wasn't an ordinary home. It belonged to one of the country's most respected and influential figures. He welcomed me warmly, but I immediately noticed the seriousness in his expression. After exchanging a few greetings, he leaned closer and lowered his voice. "I'm glad you came," he said. "There's something you need to know before anyone else." The room fell silent. Whatever he was about to reveal was clearly important, and I could already sense that this conversation would change the course of my journey in ways I had never expected. As we continued talking, he began sharing stories about the country's past. He spoke with deep respect for the generations who had fought to preserve their homeland, describing how countless people had sacrificed everything for the nation's freedom and dignity. His words carried the weight of history, and it was impossible not to feel the pride he had for his people. He then shifted the conversation to Kabul itself. "Kabul has a history stretching back more than 3,000 years, he said. "Over the centuries, countless rulers have tried to conquer this city, yet it has always endured." He explained that Kabul had served as the heart of powerful kingdoms and had witnessed the rise and fall of empires. Every era had left its mark, adding another chapter to the city's remarkable story. As we drove through the streets, he pointed toward ancient landmarks and historic neighborhoods. Their weathered walls stood as silent witnesses to centuries of triumphs, hardships, and resilience. Every corner seemed to hold a memory, every building a story waiting to be told. Finally, we approached a magnificent palace overlooking the city. Its architecture reflected both elegance and strength, blending centuries-old traditions with timeless craftsmanship. Nearby stood a historic fortress, its towering stone walls reminding visitors of the many battles and turning points that had shaped the nation's destiny. Looking out over the city, I realized Kabul was far more than just a destination. It was a place where history was still alive, where every street echoed with the voices of the past, and where every monument stood as a testament to endurance, courage, and the unbreakable spirit of its people. As we left the palace behind, my guide smiled and said, "Since you've come all this way, there's one more place you absolutely have to see." I had heard about it before. Friends who had visited the city always spoke highly of it, describing it as one of Kabul's most remarkable landmarks. Curious to see it for myself, I gladly agreed. The drive took us through busy streets where the rhythm of daily life was in full swing. Police officers stood watch at key intersections, while shops, markets, and cafes buzzed with activity. The city felt alive, yet there was an unmistakable sense of caution woven into everyday life. People moved with purpose, carrying on with their routines, despite the challenges they had learned to live alongside. As the afternoon faded into evening, the atmosphere began to change. A cool breeze swept through the streets, carrying with it the scent of fresh bread, spices, and charcoal from nearby food stalls. Families gathered in public squares, children laughed as they played, and for a moment, the city revealed a softer, more peaceful side that many outsiders rarely get to see. Our vehicle eventually climbed a winding road toward a hill overlooking the capital. From the top, the entire city stretched out before us. Countless lights flickered across the valley, creating a breathtaking view against the fading sky. It was difficult to believe that a place so often associated with hardship could also possess such quiet beauty. My host stood beside me, looking over the city in silence before speaking again. "Many people only hear about Kabul through the headlines," he said softly. "They rarely get the chance to see its heart, the resilience of its people, the richness of its history, and the hope that still lives here every single day." His words stayed with me as I looked across the glowing cityscape, realizing that every place has two stories, the one the world hears, and the one only those who visit can truly understand. As we continued our tour, my host suddenly slowed the car and pointed toward an impressive building in the distance. "That," he said with a smile, is one of the places I'm most proud of. Curious, I looked through the window as the building came into view. What is it? I asked. He glanced at me, almost surprised that I didn't recognize it. It's the National Museum. The moment he said those words, his expression changed. The smile remained, but it was now mixed with deep respect and admiration. I've visited museums in many countries, he continued, but this one is special. It doesn't just preserve history, it protects the identity of an entire nation. His words immediately captured my attention. I turned back toward the museum, taking in its architecture and wondering what treasures were hidden inside. Without another word, he steered the car toward the entrance. There it is, he said, pointing ahead. The National Museum. I looked at him with curiosity. What makes this museum so extraordinary? I asked. He smiled knowingly before answering. Come inside, he said. I'll show you why it's unlike any museum you've ever seen. Shafiq smiled before replying. No, my friend, it's much more than that. The National Museum isn't simply a building filled with old artifacts. It's a place created with a purpose centered on inspiring young people. I looked at him with curiosity. What kind of purpose? I asked. He paused for a moment, choosing his words carefully. The goal is to ensure that the younger generation never forgets the sacrifices made by those who came before them. Every nation has people who dedicate their lives to protecting its future. Some spend years defending their homeland, while others devote themselves to preserving its history, values, and identity. Those efforts must never be forgotten. He continued, his voice growing more thoughtful. The world changes quickly. New generations grow up with different priorities, and if no one reminds them of the past, they can easily lose sight of the struggles that built the present. A nation without memory slowly loses its direction. His words carried a quiet conviction. That's why this museum exists, he said. Not just to display history, but to keep it alive. Every exhibit tells a story of courage, sacrifice, perseverance, and hope. It reminds every visitor, especially the young, that the freedoms and opportunities they enjoy today were earned through the dedication of countless people. As I listened, I realized I was no longer looking at the museum as a collection of historical objects. I was beginning to see it as something far greater, a place where the past continues to speak to the future, ensuring that the lessons of history are never forgotten. I looked at him and asked, Is this museum unique to this country? Shafiq nodded. Not at all. Museums like this exist across Europe as well. Many nations have created places dedicated to preserving their history and teaching future generations where they came from. They understand that a country's strength isn't measured only by its economy or military, it also lies in how well it remembers its past. He paused before continuing. In fact, some of Europe's most respected museums attract visitors from around the world because they tell the stories that shaped their nations. They don't simply display objects behind glass, they preserve the spirit, struggles, and achievements of the people who came before. For a moment we stood quietly, taking it all in. Then Shafiq turned toward me and said, The younger generation has a huge responsibility. Every country needs places like this because they help people understand who they are and what their ancestors endured. I nodded thoughtfully. So you're saying every nation should have a museum like this? I asked. Shafiq smiled. Exactly, but there's something even more important. A museum alone isn't enough. It only has meaning when people are willing to learn from it, respect it, and carry those lessons into the future. That's how a nation keeps its identity alive, generation after generation. As we walked through another gallery, I noticed a different kind of exhibit. It wasn't filled with priceless artifacts or ancient relics. Instead, it displayed photographs, letters, and personal belongings that seemed ordinary at first glance. Unable to hold back my curiosity, I turned to Shafiq. Why are these here? I asked. He looked at the display for a moment before answering. Because a nation isn't built only by famous leaders, he said. It's also built by ordinary people whose quiet sacrifices are often forgotten. These men and women may never appear in history books, but without them, history itself would have been very different. His words made me pause. Just then, we passed a large portrait of a young man dressed in a military uniform. His expression was calm, confident, and full of determination. Shafiq noticed me looking at the photograph. Do you know who he is? He asked. I shook my head. No, I replied. He wasn't a king or a politician, Shafiq said. He was simply a young man who believed that protecting his country was more important than protecting himself. He never sought recognition or fame. He only wanted future generations to live in peace. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Looking at the photograph, I realized that true heroes are not always the ones whose names are remembered around the world. Sometimes they are ordinary people whose courage quietly changes the course of history, leaving behind a legacy that lives on through the nation they helped protect. As we continued through the museum, Shafiq stopped beside another exhibit that had drawn a crowd of young visitors. He smiled and said, "This section is one of the most important parts of the museum. Every visitor who comes here leaves with a deeper appreciation for the sacrifices that built this nation." He explained that the museum regularly welcomes students, families, and visitors from around the world. It wasn't simply a place to observe history, it was a place to learn from it. Every gallery encouraged people to reflect on the values of courage, unity, resilience, and responsibility. Then he looked at me and asked, "Tell me honestly, if your own country had a museum like this, where young people could connect with their history in such a meaningful way, wouldn't it inspire them as well?" His question stayed with me. As we walked farther into the museum, we reached another display unlike the others. Mounted prominently on the wall was a beautifully preserved ceremonial flag alongside a distinguished military medal. Both had been carefully protected, their presence commanding immediate respect. I looked at the display with curiosity. "What makes these so special?" I asked. Shafiq smiled. "They represent more than historical objects," he said. "They represent honor, sacrifice, and the enduring spirit of a nation. Their true value isn't measured by the materials they're made from, it's measured by the stories they continue to tell." "The true value of these symbols isn't found in the cloth they're made from or the metal they're cast in," Shafiq said. "Their importance comes from what they stand for. A flag or a medal becomes meaningful only because it represents the courage, sacrifice, and determination of the people behind it." His words carried a quiet sense of conviction. Then he turned toward me and smiled. "Now that you've seen the National Museum," he asked, "can you honestly say you understand why it matters so much?" I nodded thoughtfully before asking another question. "If every country were to establish a museum with the same purpose, how would it benefit society?" Shafiq answered without hesitation. "It would become one of the strongest foundations for preserving national identity and educating future generations. A museum doesn't simply protect historical objects, it safeguards a nation's collective memory. The moment someone walks through its doors, they begin a journey through the lives, struggles, achievements, and sacrifices of those who came before them." He continued as we slowly made our way through the gallery. "When people see history with their own eyes instead of only reading about it, they connect with it on a much deeper level. Every exhibit becomes a lesson, every artifact becomes a voice from the past, and every visitor leaves with a greater understanding of the responsibility they carry to protect their country's heritage and pass it on to the generations that follow." As we prepared to leave, I couldn't help but ask one final question. "Do you think a museum like this could inspire people in other countries as well?" Shafiq looked at me and smiled. "Why not?" he replied. "If other nations don't already have something like this, why shouldn't they create it?" I thought for a moment before asking, "Do you believe our country should build a museum with the same purpose?" He answered without hesitation, "Absolutely. In fact, I believe it would be one of the greatest gifts we could give future generations. Young people deserve a place where they can truly understand the journey that shaped their nation. If we want them to value their future, we must first help them understand their past." His words resonated deeply with me. "So you're saying," I asked, "that every nation has a responsibility to preserve its history for those who come after?" Shafiq nodded. "History isn't meant to be forgotten," he said. "It's meant to be protected, shared, and passed from one generation to the next. When people lose touch with their history, they lose part of their identity. But when they understand where they came from, they gain a stronger sense of purpose, unity, and responsibility." As we stepped toward the exit, I took one last look around the museum. I realized that what I had witnessed wasn't simply a collection of artifacts, it was a living reminder that every nation is built on the sacrifices, dreams, and determination of those who came before. And preserving those stories is one of the greatest responsibilities any society can carry. I looked at Shafiq and said, "One thing is certain. After returning home, I'll do everything I can to encourage people to establish a museum like this in my own country." A warm smile appeared on his face. "That would make me very happy," he replied. "But remember, a museum alone isn't enough. It only succeeds when people truly believe in its purpose and are willing to protect the stories it preserves." I nodded. "God willing," I said, "when I return home, I'll speak with scholars, educators, and community leaders. If everyone works together, perhaps we can make this vision a reality." Shafiq's eyes reflected quiet optimism. "I hope you do," he said. "If a museum like this is built one day, it won't just become another landmark. It will become a place where future generations can learn about their history, understand the sacrifices of those who came before them, and develop a stronger sense of responsibility toward their country." As our conversation came to an end, we slowly walked toward the exit. Before leaving, I turned around for one final look at the museum's halls. The exhibits, photographs, and treasured artifacts seemed to carry voices from another era, reminding every visitor that history is more than a record of the past. It is a legacy entrusted to the future. At that moment, I silently promised myself that I would never forget what I had learned here. If preserving history could inspire even one new generation to value its identity and heritage, then the journey had already been worthwhile. As our conversation ended, my journey through the museum gave way to another discovery, one that revealed the remarkable character of the country itself. Although many people know Afghanistan because of its turbulent history, they often overlook its extraordinary natural beauty. The country is home to breathtaking mountain ranges that stretch across the landscape, creating some of the most dramatic scenery in the region. Towering snow-capped peaks rise above deep valleys, while crystal-clear rivers wind through the countryside, bringing life to villages that have existed for generations. The scenery reminded me that every nation has more than one story. Beyond the headlines lies a land filled with stunning landscapes, ancient traditions, and resilient communities. The mountains dominate the horizon, standing as timeless symbols of endurance and strength, while fertile valleys and peaceful meadows offer a striking contrast to their rugged surroundings. As we traveled farther, Shafiq pointed toward one of the highest mountain ranges visible in the distance. "These mountains have shaped the history of this country," he explained. "For centuries, they've protected communities, influenced trade routes, and inspired generations of poets, explorers, and travelers. Rivers flowed through the valleys below, nourishing farmland and providing water to countless towns and villages. Watching the sunlight reflect off the rushing water, I realized that nature had given this land a beauty that few people outside the region ever truly get the chance to appreciate. The more I saw, the more I understood that this country could never be defined by a single chapter of its history. Its landscapes, its people, and its enduring spirit all told a much richer story, one of resilience, beauty, and hope that deserved to be remembered just as much as its past." The rivers of this land are among the largest on earth. One of them is the mighty Amu River, flowing along the country's northern frontier. Another is the Kabul River, the largest river in the region, which eventually crosses the border and continues into neighboring lands. Countless smaller streams rush down from the towering mountains, feeding the valleys and bringing life wherever they flow. Afghanistan is a country of rugged mountains and broad deserts. The deserts are mostly dry and barren, receiving very little rainfall throughout the year. In some regions, the average annual rainfall is only a few inches. The mountains, however, are home to dense forests, where heavy rains and winter snowfall are common. These forests provide shelter to many kinds of wildlife, making them an important part of the country's natural beauty. Among the mountains, hard-working people have built their lives for generations. Across the hillsides, they carefully cultivate the land, planting crops wherever the rocky soil allows. Sheep and goats graze across the high pastures, while farming remains the main source of livelihood for many families. Although the terrain is harsh and challenging, the people continue to live with determination, drawing strength from the land that has sustained them for centuries. The country is rich in natural resources, including coal and salt. Its rivers also have tremendous potential for producing hydroelectric power, offering an important source of energy for the future. Reaching this country by sea is impossible because it has no coastline. Most of the land is covered by rugged mountains, vast deserts, and thick forests. Long before the arrival of Islam, this region was home to followers of ancient Persian religions. Over the centuries, many different cultures and civilizations left their mark here. Today, the people of Afghanistan come from a variety of ethnic backgrounds, with Pashtuns forming the largest community. Kabul, the nation's capital, is its largest and most important city. Much of the city has expanded rapidly over the years, stretching across the surrounding valleys and hillsides. Even though many people have moved there in search of opportunity, Kabul continues to face serious challenges. Its population has grown faster than its infrastructure, creating pressure on housing, transportation, and essential services. As I sat among my fellow travelers, one of them smiled and said, "You know, Kabul is one of the oldest capitals in the world." He pointed toward the distant skyline as we continued our journey. The city is surrounded by majestic mountains that stand watch over it from every direction. The Kabul River winds through the heart of the city, giving life to the valley. In the old marketplaces, people still gather every day, just as they have for generations, filling the streets with energy, tradition, and stories waiting to be discovered. We soon discovered something unusual. There was no coastline anywhere in the country. Afghanistan is completely landlocked, surrounded on every side by neighboring nations. No ships sail into its ports because it has none, and every journey in or out must be made across mountains, deserts, or border crossings. As we explored Kabul, I noticed newspapers printed in both Persian and English being sold on busy street corners. They reflected the country's rich cultural mix and its connection to the wider world. The city itself felt alive, with people from different backgrounds sharing the same streets, markets, and neighborhoods. One of my companions laughed and said, "I can hardly believe this place was once the center of such a powerful kingdom." There was pride in his voice as he looked around. Afghanistan has witnessed the rise and fall of countless empires. Few places in the world have such a remarkable history. He paused for a moment before adding, "Remember this. Any nation can become prosperous if its people truly decide to build a better future. Even the greatest achievements begin with determination and a willingness to work together." Then he continued, "Real progress starts when people make the best use of the opportunities they already have, instead of waiting for perfect conditions. Every generation has the chance to shape a stronger future." As I listened, I quietly looked out the window. The mountains stretched endlessly across the horizon, reminding me that every difficult journey begins with a single step forward. No challenge is too great if people refuse to give up. "Exactly," Dorian replied with a thoughtful smile. "That's why I believe this country still has a future. It may not be easy, but with patience and determination, remarkable change is possible." He looked ahead for a moment before continuing. "Never forget this. Real progress begins when people are willing to improve themselves. A nation's future is shaped by the choices its people make." I asked him, "But how can ordinary people create that kind of change?" Dorian answered calmly, "The first step is education. When people gain knowledge, they begin to understand both their strengths and their responsibilities. Education gives individuals the confidence to solve problems instead of running from them." He continued, "But education alone is not enough. A nation also needs discipline, honesty, and a deep sense of responsibility. When citizens care about their communities, protect what they have, and work together instead of against one another, even the greatest obstacles can be overcome." He smiled and added, "If every person makes even a small positive contribution, those efforts eventually become something much greater. That is how strong nations are built, one step, one family, and one generation at a time." I listened carefully, realizing that his words were about far more than one country. They were lessons that could inspire people anywhere in the world. And when the season for growing crops finally arrives, he continued, "No one should remain idle. If every person contributes through honest work, the country can become stronger and more prosperous. There is always something meaningful that can be done." Dorian smiled. "We can begin that work ourselves." He looked around before adding, "Even small efforts matter. A tiny stream eventually becomes a river, and every great accomplishment begins with a single step. We may not be able to transform everything overnight, but we can do our part." Then Dorian suddenly asked, "Have you ever seen a tiny seed?" A seed? I replied. Yes, a seed. He slowed his pace and picked up a small pebble from the ground, turning it thoughtfully in his hand before speaking again. People often overlook small beginnings because they seem insignificant. But if a seed is planted in fertile soil and cared for with patience, it can grow into a mighty tree. In the same way, the future of a nation is shaped by small acts of determination, knowledge, and hard work. Great changes never appear all at once, they grow steadily, one step at a time. How can we make that happen? I asked. Dorian answered without hesitation. With patience, perseverance, and faith in the future. He paused for a moment, then continued. If we keep taking the right steps, no matter how small they seem, every effort will eventually bring us closer to our destination. The journey may be long, but progress is made one step at a time. I smiled. You always seem to have an answer for everything. He laughed quietly. Not for everything, but I do believe that every problem has a solution if people are willing to search for it instead of giving up. His words filled me with confidence. I silently thanked God for allowing me to meet someone whose wisdom reached far beyond books and facts. From that moment on, I became even more determined to continue exploring Kabul with an open mind and a hopeful heart. The rest of our companions had also grown quiet. The conversation had left everyone deep in thought. We continued walking through the streets of the city, surrounded by the distant mountains, while the afternoon sun slowly drifted toward the horizon. Every corner of Kabul seemed to hold another story, and with each step, my curiosity about this remarkable place only grew stronger. For weeks, I wandered through the city, searching everywhere for the address that had been written in the notebook, but I never found it. Dear readers, I have now reached the final page of this book. I sincerely hope you enjoyed reading it. Over the past 7 months, I have done my best to present every event exactly as it happened, with complete honesty. Every effort was made to ensure that nothing important was left out and that the story remained true to the experiences I lived through. May peace, mercy, and blessings be upon you all. Your brother, Nadim. The Haunted Mansion by Nadim Ahmed. This story is based on a true incident. In the heart of a quiet European city stands an old abandoned mansion that locals simply call the Haunted House. No one remembers its original name anymore. Legends surrounding the place have existed for generations, and over the years, countless strange stories have become attached to it. Some people claim mysterious figures appear inside after dark, while others insist that unexplained voices echo through its empty halls. Because of these unsettling rumors, the mansion has become one of the city's most feared landmarks. The mansion sits just outside a small residential neighborhood. A short distance away is a cemetery, and not far beyond that stands another forgotten graveyard. Nearly 50 years ago, the family who owned the estate mysteriously disappeared, leaving behind a property wrapped in unanswered questions and whispered tales. Not long after the family's disappearance, another wealthy household purchased the mansion, hoping to begin a new chapter there. They named the estate the Haunted Mansion, but before long, they began experiencing things they simply couldn't explain. Neighbors noticed that the new owners rarely left the property, and before many weeks had passed, strange rumors started spreading throughout the area. People whispered that eerie sounds echoed from the mansion late at night, as if someone or something was moving through the empty rooms. No one knows exactly what happened inside those walls. Some claimed they saw shadowy figures wandering from room to room, while others insisted they caught brief glimpses of pale faces staring silently through the upper windows. Most residents refused to go anywhere near the mansion after sunset, convinced that whatever haunted the place became more active once darkness fell. Even during the day, many avoided walking past the estate unless absolutely necessary. Now let me tell you about my friend Nadim. We first met while studying together in college and eventually became close friends. During one of our long breaks, Nadim suggested we take a trip into the countryside. I agreed without hesitation. We packed our bags, rented a car, and set off early the next morning. After several hours on the road, we reached a small rural village where we planned to spend the night. As we arrived, Nadim pointed toward the edge of the village and said quietly, "There isn't much beyond this point. The nearest town is miles away, and after dark, hardly anyone comes through here." Just as Nadim had said, the village was small and isolated, with the nearest city many miles away. On the outskirts stood an old, abandoned church that looked as though it had been forgotten by time. That night, we settled in and got some much-needed rest. The following morning, after breakfast, we decided to explore the village. As we wandered through its quiet streets, we noticed something unusual. A narrow dirt path stretched away from the main road toward a dense forest. Curiosity got the better of us, so we followed it until we reached a small bridge. Beside the bridge stood an elderly man with a long white beard, leaning on a wooden cane and watching us in silence. The moment he saw us, he slowly stepped closer and asked, "You two, you're not from around here, are you?" Nadim smiled politely and replied, "No, sir. We're students from the University of Edinburgh. We're just here for a short visit." The old man nodded thoughtfully for a moment before asking, "Have you come to see the haunted mansion?" "No," Nadim answered. "Actually, we didn't even know there was a haunted mansion here. That's the real reason we stopped to talk to you." The old man stared at us for a long moment before speaking again. "You boys are from the University of Edinburgh?" he asked. Nadim nodded. "Yes, sir." The old man lowered his voice and said, "If that's true, then you should know something before you go any farther." I looked at him with growing curiosity. He studied our faces carefully, as if trying to decide whether we were ready to hear what he was about to say. Then he asked, "Have either of you ever heard the name Andrew?" Nadim shook his head. "No, sir, I don't think we've ever heard that name." The old man let out a slow sigh. "Very well," he said. "Come with me." Without another word, he turned and began walking toward the edge of the village. Nadim and I exchanged puzzled glances but decided to follow him. After several minutes, we reached a small roadside cafe. The old man stopped outside and looked back at us. "My name is Karim," he said. "There's no point trying to tell this story while standing out here. Come inside, sit down, and I'll tell you everything from the beginning." Nadim agreed, and the three of us stepped into the quiet cafe, unaware that what we were about to hear would change the course of our journey forever. After everyone had settled into their seats, Karim began his story. It all started with a man named Andrew. He owned a large estate just outside the village. Behind his home stretched an enormous garden filled with ancient trees. Even in broad daylight, the place felt strangely lifeless. The trees were old and twisted, and many of them had long since withered, leaving the entire property wrapped in an unsettling silence. Karim paused for a moment as our food was brought to the table. Once everything had been served, he looked at us and asked, "Do either of you know why people call that place the Haunted Mansion?" Andrew and I exchanged glances before Nadim answered. "Honestly, sir, we have no idea. That's exactly what we're hoping you'll tell us." Karim gave a faint smile. "Then listen carefully," he said. "What I'm about to tell you isn't just another ghost story." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "If you truly want to understand the mystery of that mansion, you can't begin with the building itself. You have to start with Andrew, because without knowing his story, you'll never understand why that place became what it is today. The mystery of the mansion can only be understood if we begin with Andrew's story." Karim took a slow sip of tea before continuing. Andrew had inherited a vast fortune from his father. Owning land, gardens, and large estates was nothing unusual for wealthy families of that time, and his estate was considered one of the finest in the region. We often visited his property. It was breathtaking. Towering trees surrounded the grounds. Colorful flower beds stretched across the gardens, and every path was carefully maintained. But there was one place that always caught my attention, a massive old building standing deep within the estate. Even then, no one seemed to know why it had been built or what purpose it had once served. The building stood a short distance away from Andrew's main house. One day, as we were walking through the estate together, I noticed him staring toward it in complete silence. There was something unusual about the expression on his face, as though the place had completely captured his thoughts. I finally asked him, "Andrew, what are you looking at?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he kept his eyes fixed on the old mansion, as if something hidden inside it had been calling to him for a very long time. Thinking quickly, Professor Davidson got to his feet. His face turned pale. Could this really be the work of the same group that stole the priceless crown jewels? He wondered. No, this can't be a coincidence, he said firmly. The people behind that theft are incredibly dangerous. If they're involved, we can't waste a second. So what should we do? Debbie asked anxiously. We need to contact the police immediately, the professor replied. Not a single moment should be lost. Without hesitation, the professor rushed to the nearest telephone. After speaking with the police, he returned, but the color had drained from his face. It was obvious that the news he had received was anything but reassuring. What happened? Debbie asked, her voice trembling with concern. The situation is worse than I feared, Professor Davidson said quietly. Just a little while ago, police discovered another body in the city. The victim had the exact same strange mark burned into their hand, and the officers have no idea who the killer is. We can't afford to waste any more time, he said. We need to see that strange mark for ourselves. Only then will we know exactly what we're dealing with. Without another word, the three of them hurried to the city hospital, where the latest victim's body had been taken. As soon as they arrived, the professor made his way to the doctor in charge. I'm Professor Davidson from the police investigation team, he introduced himself. I'd like permission to examine the victim. Of course, Professor Davidson, the doctor replied with a polite smile. The doctor led them down a quiet hallway and stopped in front of a large metal door. He unlocked it and gestured for them to step inside. Please come in, Professor Davidson. The room was cold and silent. The body rested on a stainless steel examination table covered with a white sheet. The professor slowly pulled the sheet back and carefully studied the victim's hand. A deep look of concern spread across his face. There's no doubt about it, he murmured. It's the exact same mark. As Professor Davidson studied the strange symbol, an uneasy feeling settled over him. It seemed as though he had seen it somewhere before, but he couldn't remember where. The others stood silently, watching him. The room was so still that no one dared to speak. Then, without taking his eyes off the mark, the professor quietly said, Debbie? Yes, Professor, she answered immediately. Keeping his focus on the victim's hand, he asked, Has anyone said anything? A voice came from behind him. Yes, Professor Davidson. Is something wrong? Without turning around, he replied, This symbol, it feels strangely familiar. Do you remember where you've seen it? Debbie asked. I'm very close, he said, his voice thoughtful. I know I've seen it before. Another voice interrupted. If you can't remember, perhaps I can help. The professor slowly turned toward the speaker, his expression filled with curiosity. Do you know where this symbol comes from? He asked. No, I don't, the man replied, but I do know someone who does. Who? Professor Davidson asked. My younger brother. And why would he know? Because he lives in Pakistan. The professor stared at the symbol once more before looking back at the man. You mean this mark is connected to Pakistan? Yes, the man answered. I can't explain everything myself, but my brother has spent years studying ancient history there. If anyone can identify this symbol, it's him. Professor Davidson nodded slowly. Then there's no time to lose. We need to speak with him immediately. There's one problem, the man admitted. He lives in a remote area, and reaching him won't be easy. It could take days before we make contact. That's a risk we'll have to take, the professor said. Right now, this symbol is our only real lead. He took one final look at the mysterious mark on the victim's hand. If the answers are in Pakistan, he said with quiet determination, then that's exactly where our investigation is headed. A heavy silence filled the room. They all understood that the case had just taken an unexpected turn, and whatever awaited them next would be far more dangerous than they had imagined. Then we're leaving at once? Debbie asked. Professor Davidson nodded. There's no time to waste. We're dealing with something far bigger than an ordinary investigation. If this symbol truly leads us to the answers, we have to follow it. The man spoke again. My brother lives deep in the mountains, Reaching him won't be easy, and he doesn't trust strangers. But if anyone can uncover the truth behind this symbol, it's him. Professor Davidson turned toward Debbie. Start making the travel arrangements. We're heading to Europe first, and from there we'll continue to our contact. Debbie immediately began organizing everything they would need for the journey. A faint smile crossed the professor's face. So, he said quietly, it seems our investigation is finally moving in the right direction. It certainly looks that way, Debbie replied, but are we truly prepared for what lies ahead? The professor looked around the room one last time before his eyes settled on the mysterious mark burned into the victim's hand. Whether we're ready or not, he said with unwavering determination, our search for the truth begins now. I still don't understand, Debbie said. You'll understand soon enough, the professor replied. The conversation ended there, and the three of them left the hospital together. The road ahead was long, and no one could predict what dangers might be waiting for them. Yet none of them considered turning back. Every answer they sought seemed to be leading them toward the same destination. After a long silence, Professor Davidson finally spoke. I have a feeling we're not the only ones searching for the truth. Someone else is after this symbol as well, and they'll do whatever it takes to reach it before we do. What makes you think that? Debbie asked. Because whoever left this mark behind wanted it to be found. This isn't random. It's a message, and someone is trying to make sure we never discover what it really means. No one said another word. The weight of the professor's theory hung heavily in the air as they continued their journey. After a while, Debbie broke the silence. You never answered my question before. Where exactly are we going? The professor glanced ahead before answering. We're heading to a quiet village in Europe. That's where we'll find the man who may be able to identify this symbol. If we are lucky, he'll give us the first real clue that brings us closer to the truth. We can discuss everything on the way, Professor Davidson said. Right now, every second matters. By evening, they had reached a small European town. Without wasting time, they drove straight to the address they had been given. There, they met a man who had recently arrived from another country and was rumored to possess extensive knowledge of ancient symbols and forgotten civilizations. The three of them sat quietly, gathering their thoughts. Professor Davidson explained everything that had happened so far and described the mysterious mark found on the victims. The man listened without interrupting. When the professor finished, he slowly stood up and walked toward an old wooden cabinet. After unlocking it, he pulled out a large weathered book wrapped in faded black cloth. He carefully placed the book on the table. I believe, he said in a calm voice, this is what you've been searching for. The professor stepped closer as the man gently opened the fragile pages. Near the center of the book was a hand-drawn symbol. It was identical to the mark found on the victims. For a moment, no one spoke. Professor Davidson stared at the page, realizing that the answers they had been chasing all along might finally be within reach. The man carefully turned another fragile page. Faded black sketches covered the parchment, each one marked with symbols that had survived for centuries. He pointed to one particular illustration and looked at Professor Davidson. Take a close look, he said. Doesn't this resemble the mark you found on the victims? The professor leaned in, studying the drawing with intense concentration. After a long moment, he slowly nodded. Yes, it's almost identical. I've seen this place before. Everyone turned toward Professor Davidson. Before anyone could ask what he meant, he pointed to a section of the ancient map. Look carefully. What are we looking at? Debbie asked. This isn't just an old map, the professor said. It's a record of an ancient structure, and according to these markings, someone discovered it centuries ago, but they were never able to unlock its secret. The man nodded in agreement. These writings suggest that the structure still exists somewhere in Europe. Then why hasn't anyone found it? Debbie asked. Because the exact location was deliberately hidden, the man replied. The people who created this record wanted to protect it from falling into the wrong hands. The professor's expression grew more serious. That means whoever is leaving these symbols already knows more than we do. Exactly, the man said. And if my theory is correct, They've already uncovered information that hasn't been revealed to anyone else. Professor Davidson closed the ancient book and looked at his companions. Then we can't afford to waste another minute. We need to reach that location before they do. The race was no longer just about solving a mystery. It had become a desperate struggle to uncover a forgotten secret before someone else claimed it first. But there's one important difference, the man explained. The symbol on the victims is incomplete. This version is the original. A silence settled over the room. So what does it mean? Debbie asked. The man closed the book for a moment before answering. According to these ancient records, this symbol was never meant to stand alone. It was one piece of something much larger, a hidden trail left behind centuries ago. Professor Davidson exchanged a glance with Debbie. If that's true, he said, then someone isn't just leaving clues. They're following an ancient path. The man nodded. And if they're already following it, we need to move quickly. Every hour we lose gives them a greater advantage. Without another word, the professor closed the book and looked at his team. We're leaving immediately. The search had entered a new chapter, and for the first time they knew they were no longer chasing a mystery. They were racing against someone who was already far ahead. That's right, the man replied. As soon as they finished studying the ancient structure, they stepped outside. A car was already waiting for them. Where are we going now? Debbie asked. There's a researcher in Pakistan who specializes in ancient civilizations, the man explained. I believe he's currently in Karachi. We need to meet him as soon as possible. And what makes him so important? Professor Davidson asked. He has spent years studying these forgotten symbols, the man replied. If anyone can help us uncover the truth, it's him. Without another word, they set off. The journey was long, and no one spoke much along the way. Each of them was lost in thought, trying to piece together everything they had learned so far. Finally, the man broke the silence. There's something you should know. Everyone turned toward him. The ancient structure isn't just a historical site, he said quietly. Hidden inside it is a secret chamber, and according to the records, no one has ever managed to reach it. Just as they were about to leave, Professor Davidson's phone rang. Hello? A familiar voice answered from the other end. You're searching for people who know the truth, the caller said, but you're looking in the wrong place. The professor frowned. Who is this? You'll find out soon enough, the voice replied. For now, listen carefully. If you want answers, don't trust everyone who claims to be your ally. Someone very close to you is hiding the truth. Before the professor could respond, the line went dead. A heavy silence filled the room. What was that about? Debbie asked. Professor Davidson lowered the phone, his expression tense. Whoever that was knows exactly what we're doing, he said. And they wanted to warn us, or perhaps mislead us. The others exchanged uneasy glances. So what do we do now? Debbie asked. The professor paused for a moment before answering. We continue exactly as planned. Until we have proof, we can't afford to accuse anyone. But from this moment on, we trust no one without question. Just then, another voice broke the silence. There's one more thing you need to know, the man said. If we're going to uncover the truth, we'll have to move faster than ever. Every minute we lose gives our enemies another chance to stay one step ahead. Your journey ends here. The sharp voice echoed through the silence. Professor Davidson instantly stopped and looked toward the source. Who's there? He called out. No one answered. Then the voice spoke again. Turn around, before it's too late. The professor's expression hardened. Professor Davidson, he said calmly, one thing has become absolutely clear. We're no longer dealing with ordinary criminals. We're up against a powerful and highly organized network. Without wasting another second, they hurried outside and climbed into the waiting vehicle. They drove through crowded streets and busy marketplaces, carefully watching every passing face, searching for anyone who might be following them. Even in the darkness, Professor Davidson couldn't shake the feeling that someone was always watching. Late that night, after leaving the city behind, they reached a quiet, isolated road. The headlights cut through the darkness as the car continued forward. None of them realized that, hidden somewhere nearby, unseen eyes were silently tracking their every move. At daybreak, we resumed our journey. Every passing mile brought new uncertainty, yet we knew there was no turning back. That night, we arrived in a small, unfamiliar European town. The streets were unusually quiet, and a cold wind drifted through the empty roads. We checked into a modest hotel, where we were welcomed by the owner, an elderly man with a calm but observant demeanor. After settling in, we sat down to discuss everything that had happened. The conversation soon shifted to our next destination. "We can't stay here for long," Professor Davidson said. "Our next lead takes us farther east, and every delay gives our enemies more time." The hotel owner listened carefully before speaking. "You're traveling a dangerous road," he said. "Many people have passed through this town chasing old legends. Very few ever returned with the answers they were looking for." The room fell silent. Professor Davidson exchanged a glance with Debbie. "Legends or not," he replied, "someone is willing to kill to protect this secret. That alone tells us we're getting closer to the truth." Outside, the wind continued to howl through the empty streets, as if warning them that the next stage of their journey would be far more dangerous than the last. By the next morning, we reached the border crossing. The checkpoint was heavily guarded, and every traveler was required to present identification before being allowed through. When our turn came, an immigration officer carefully examined our passports. After studying them for a moment, he looked up at Professor Davidson. "Sir," the officer said politely, "your destination is inside a restricted region. I'm afraid I can't authorize your entry." Professor Davidson remained calm. "And why not?" "I'm sorry," the officer replied, "but those are my instructions. No one is permitted to enter that area without special clearance." For a moment, it seemed as though their journey had come to an unexpected halt. Then the officer glanced at the passport once more. His expression suddenly changed. He looked back at Professor Davidson with surprise, as though he had just recognized something important. Without another word, he reached for the telephone beside his desk and quietly called someone, leaving the group to wonder what would happen next. The immigration officer lowered the phone and looked back at Professor Davidson. "So you're the man they told us about," he said. "You're investigating the mysterious symbol." Professor Davidson gave a slight nod. "Yes," he replied calmly. "That's correct." The officer studied him for a moment before speaking again. "In that case, everything changes. I had strict orders not to let anyone enter this region without authorization, but your arrival was expected." Professor Davidson exchanged a quick glance with Debbie, surprised by what he had just heard. "You were expecting us?" he asked. The officer nodded. "Yes, I was instructed that if a man named Professor Davidson arrived asking about the ancient symbol, I was to assist him in every way possible." The room fell silent. "Then tell me," Professor Davidson said, "who gave those orders?" "I can't answer that," the officer replied. "All I know is that someone very influential wants you to continue this investigation." He stepped aside and gestured toward the secured gate. "You're now authorized to enter the restricted area, but once you cross this border, there's no guarantee of your safety." Professor Davidson looked at his companions, then back at the open gate. Without another word, the team gathered their belongings and stepped forward, knowing they were about to enter the most dangerous phase of their investigation yet. Iran's chief of staff looked at him and said, "You're free to go." Pervez replied, "I have one request. Please don't hand me over to the Indians. They'll torture me. I'm not a spy, I'm just a civilian." The Iranian colonel gave him a long, thoughtful look before speaking. "Kamal," he said, "I know you're telling the truth, but I can't simply release you. Once I do, the Indian police will come after me. They'll accuse me of helping you escape. My own career would be destroyed, and it would create unnecessary tension between our countries." He paused, then continued more calmly. "So here's what I'm going to do. I'll arrange for you to stay safely at a trusted friend's house. For now, that's the best option." A wave of relief washed over Pervez. After everything he had endured, it finally felt like someone was willing to help him. As they stepped outside and got into the passport office vehicle, Pervez looked out the window, wondering if this unexpected turn of events might finally lead him toward freedom. Pervez replied, "That's exactly what I've been trying to explain. I came to Iran by mistake. I was trying to cross into Eastern Europe through Turkey. There's no doubt about that. You can verify every part of my story. I have nothing to hide. The colonel studied him carefully. I believe you, he finally said. Not once have I felt that you were lying. A spark of hope returned to Pervez's heart. Maybe for the first time in a long while, someone truly understood what he had been through. I can't do that, Pervez replied. The moment I return to India, I'll be arrested. I'll never even get the chance to explain what really happened. After a long silence, the colonel finally made his decision. He called in one of his officers and instructed him to take Pervez back to Kabul. The officer immediately escorted him to a vehicle, and before long they were on the road. By the time they reached Kabul, evening had already fallen. Pervez was taken to a local guest house where he spent the night under watch. The next morning, after breakfast, the officer led him to a small travel agency. There, they purchased a ticket for the following night's flight to New Delhi. With the arrangements complete, Pervez was brought back to the guest house, where he waited quietly for his departure. Later, another officer from the Iranian embassy arrived in Kabul. This man treated Pervez with noticeably more kindness and respect. He patiently explained that, under Iranian law, Pervez's time in the country had technically exceeded the permitted limit. However, after discussing the matter with his superiors, the authorities had decided to overlook the violation. Thankfully, the officer said, the Iranian officials chose not to pursue any legal action against you. Then you can make the decision yourself, Pervez said quietly. You can allow me to remain safely in Iran. The colonel shook his head. That simply isn't possible, he replied. Given the current situation, my government would never approve it. We can't officially allow you to stay in Iran. Then what should I do? Pervez asked, his voice filled with uncertainty. After thinking for a moment, the colonel said, you should return to India with your passport. Once you're back, apply for a visa again and re-enter through the proper legal process. That's the safest and most practical solution I can offer. I don't even know what crime I'm supposed to have committed, Pervez said. Still, thank you for showing me compassion. The officer smiled gently. You don't need to thank me, he replied. You've been through enough already. I just hope that one day you'll understand why things had to be handled this way. Just before Pervez boarded his flight, the officer shook his hand one last time. My brother, he said, you are from Pakistan, and we consider the people of Pakistan our brothers as well. We don't want anything to come between our two nations. That's why I'm asking you one favor. He paused before continuing. When you return home, don't speak negatively about Iran because of what happened to you. Tell people that the Iranian authorities treated you fairly and with respect. Let them know that we did everything we could to help. That's all I ask. Pervez nodded sincerely. Deeply moved by the officer's kindness, he promised to honor his request. A short while later, he boarded the flight, carrying with him not only the memories of his ordeal, but also the unexpected compassion of the people who had shown him humanity when he needed it most. Pervez could have walked away and forgotten everything that had happened. Instead, he chose to keep his promise. He never spoke unfairly about Iran or blamed its people for the hardships he had faced. Years later, while sharing his life story with me, he described every event exactly as it had happened. He spoke openly about the difficult moments, but he also made sure to mention the kindness and fairness shown to him by the Iranian officials. Will you do one thing for me? He asked. Of course, I replied. I may never be able to return to Iran, he said. The authorities might never allow me back, and I accept that. But if you ever have the chance to mention my story, please tell people one thing. I looked at him, waiting for him to continue. Tell them I still have great respect for Iran, he said. Please let the people of Pakistan know that I remain grateful to the Iranian authorities for the compassion they showed me. The narrator smiled and asked, suppose you somehow managed to return to Europe. Would you ever try to go back to Iran? Pervez answered without hesitation. If I could enter Iran without needing a visa, I would go there even today. I would travel through every city I could, because despite everything that happened, I still carry a deep respect for that country. If I were allowed to cross its border again, I would do it without a second thought. He paused for a moment before adding, But I know that's impossible. Without a visa, I can't legally enter Iran, and I have no reason to expect the authorities to make an exception for me. I smiled and said, maybe one day that will change. As I listened to him, I realized something important. People often judge an entire nation based on a single painful experience, but Pervez had chosen a different path. Even after all the hardships he had endured, he refused to let bitterness define his view of an entire country or its people. That quiet grace was perhaps the most remarkable part of his story. There was a long silence. Then Pervez looked at me and said, "Please tell everyone one more thing." I nodded. After everything I went through, I still believe no hardship lasts forever. The darkest moments eventually pass. He continued, "Human beings are often tested in ways they never expect. But those difficult times should never become an excuse to lose hope. No matter how painful life becomes, every challenge teaches us something, strengthens us, and gives us another chance to move forward." Then he added quietly, "That's what I learned. No matter how deep the suffering is, if you refuse to give up, one day you find your way back to the light." I remembered Pervez's final words to me. Even today, they echo in my mind. "Never let difficult circumstances destroy your character," he had said, "and never lose hope in God's mercy." Those words stayed with me long after our conversation ended. As I reflected on everything Pervez had endured, I realized that his story wasn't just about hardship, it was about resilience. Every setback had tested him, yet he refused to surrender to despair. Instead of allowing suffering to fill him with bitterness, he chose patience, faith, and hope. That night, after we parted ways, I lay awake thinking about his journey. I couldn't help but wonder how many people around the world were facing struggles just as overwhelming, quietly fighting battles no one else could see. Perhaps the greatest lesson in Pervez's story was this: no matter how difficult the road becomes, hope always remains. The next morning, I woke up feeling strangely lighter. For the first time in a long while, I had slept peacefully. Before leaving, I asked Pervez one final question, one that had been on my mind ever since I first heard his story. "What message do you want people to remember from everything you've been through?" I asked. He smiled faintly. "My story isn't just about me," he said. "It's about every person who has ever faced hardship." He continued, "When life pushes you to the edge, it's easy to believe that everything is over. But that's exactly when you have to keep moving. The world may close one door, but another will eventually open if you refuse to give up." He paused before adding, "Never let fear or disappointment take control of your life. Every difficult season comes to an end. If you stay patient, protect your integrity, and keep your faith alive, you'll discover that even the darkest road can lead to a new beginning." As I said goodbye, I realized I hadn't just listened to an extraordinary journey, I had witnessed the quiet strength of someone who refused to let suffering define the rest of his life. It was impossible not to be inspired by his determination. After saying goodbye, I set out on my own journey, carrying the lessons I had learned from him. Early the next morning, around 7 o'clock, I boarded a bus bound for Zahedan. By 10, I arrived at the terminal and made my way into the city. The streets were already alive with people beginning their day, and before long I found myself wandering through the local marketplace. The bazaar was full of energy. Small shops lined the narrow streets, selling everything from clothing and household goods to fresh produce and handmade crafts. Vendors called out to passing customers while families moved from stall to stall, creating the familiar rhythm of everyday life. As I explored, I reached an old mosque standing quietly at one end of the market. Nearby, a few elderly men sat together in conversation while children played in the open courtyard. The peaceful scene was a sharp contrast to the tension and uncertainty that had filled so much of the journey I had just heard about. For a while, I simply stood there, taking it all in, reflecting on how ordinary life continues even after extraordinary hardships. It reminded me that every place has more than one story, and every journey leaves behind lessons that stay with us long after the road comes to an end. Just as I was leaving, I heard someone call out behind me, "Excuse me! Hey, traveler!" I turned around but couldn't immediately tell who was speaking. The busy market was filled with people moving in every direction. Then an elderly man stepped out from the crowd and approached me with a warm smile. "Come over here for a moment," he said. His voice carried a kindness that instantly put me at ease. He wore simple, traditional clothing, and his weathered face reflected years of experience. His bright eyes and gentle smile reminded me of someone who genuinely cared about the people around him. I walked over. "Yes?" I asked. "Is there something you need?" Without saying another word, he reached into the pocket of his long coat, pulled out a handful of mixed nuts and dried fruit, and placed them in my hands. "You're a guest," he said softly. "Please accept this." His unexpected generosity caught me by surprise. It was such a small gesture, yet it carried a warmth that spoke volumes about the kindness of ordinary people. I smiled and said, "Sir, you've already shown me enough kindness. Please keep these for yourself. I've only been away from Afghanistan for a couple of days." The old man looked at me with affection, then reached into the pocket of his vest and pulled out a few folded banknotes. He tried to place them in my hand. Startled, I quickly stepped back. "No," I said. "Please don't do that. Why are you giving me money?" He looked at me with sincere concern. "My son," he replied, "you're far from home. You shouldn't have to worry about every small expense while traveling." He gently took my hand again and insisted that I accept it. I was overwhelmed by his generosity. Here was a man I had never met before, treating me like family simply because I was a traveler. At that moment, I realized that true kindness often comes from complete strangers. Sometimes the people who leave the deepest impression on our lives are those who expect nothing in return. The old man smiled and said, "Please don't refuse. Keep this with you." I respectfully replied, "Thank you, sir, but I'm on my way back to Pakistan. I'll be boarding my flight from here, and in just a couple of days I'll be home." He nodded, then said, "Well, in that case, at least let me invite you to my home. We can share a meal together." I smiled and answered, "That's a generous offer, but I still have some shopping to finish and my bus to the airport will be leaving soon. I'm afraid I don't have enough time." He looked at me for a moment, then reached into his pocket once more. This time he took out a small business card and placed it in my hand. "My son," he said warmly, "if you ever return to this city, don't stay in a hotel. Come straight to my home. Even if it's a month from now or years from now, my door will always be open for you." I looked down at the card, deeply touched by his words. In a foreign land, a complete stranger had offered me something priceless. Not money, not gifts, but the feeling that I would always have a place where I was welcome. I carefully tucked the old man's business card into my pocket. His kindness had left a lasting impression on me. Even though we had been complete strangers just moments earlier, he had treated me with the warmth of a lifelong friend. In difficult times, you quickly discover who truly stands beside you. I had never expected to find such compassion so far from home. Yet this man, without asking for anything in return, had offered me generosity, encouragement, and a place where I would always be welcome. As I walked away, I turned back one last time. He was still standing there, smiling and waving goodbye. I'll never forget those people. Their kindness restored my faith in humanity and reminded me that goodness can appear when you least expect it. Looking back now, I realize those encounters became some of the most meaningful memories of my journey. They proved that, even in the middle of uncertainty, there are people whose simple acts of compassion can change the way you see the world forever. As I continued walking through the market, I couldn't stop thinking about the elderly man. His kindness had reminded me that even in unfamiliar places, genuine humanity still exists. A little farther down the street, another shopkeeper called me over with a friendly smile. "Come here, traveler," he said. I stepped inside his small store. Without asking me to buy anything, he welcomed me warmly and insisted that I sit down. He served me a cup of hot tea and began asking about my journey. When he learned where I had come from, his face lit up with concern and curiosity. We talked for a while, and before I left, he quietly handed me a small package. "What's this?" I asked. "Just a little gift," he replied. "You're our guest." I hesitated, not wanting to accept anything more. He smiled and gently insisted. "It isn't about the value," he said. "It's about showing respect to someone traveling far from home." His words stayed with me as I thanked him and stepped back onto the busy street. Not long afterward, another elderly man standing outside a nearby shop noticed me and called out with the same warm greeting. "Come here, traveler." Seeing the man lying on the bed, Robert Morris smiled and said, "Looks like the patient is finally awake." The moment those words reached him, the man slowly opened his eyes. At first, everything around him was a blur. The room, the walls, the people standing nearby, nothing came into focus. Then, after a few moments, his vision gradually cleared. As his surroundings sharpened, he noticed two men standing beside his bed, studying him closely, almost as if they were waiting for something. Their expressions carried quiet curiosity, making him wonder why they were staring at him that way. One of them leaned in and asked gently, "How are you feeling?" The man looked at him in confusion. His voice barely escaped his lips. The other man stepped forward. "Please don't try to speak if it's too difficult." He fell silent again. His eyes drifted across the room as if searching for something or someone, but nothing felt familiar. A strange emptiness settled over him, leaving him with the unsettling feeling that an important part of himself had simply vanished. The man frowned, struggling to make sense of the question. "My memory feels completely blank," he admitted. "But at least I can still speak. If I couldn't even do that, how would I answer you?" Robert Morris exchanged a quick glance with the other man before turning back toward him. "Can you tell us your name?" The question lingered in the air. The man searched his mind, desperate to find an answer, but every attempt only led to silence. He squeezed his eyes shut, forcing himself to remember. A sharp ache spread through his head as if his mind were resisting him. He pressed both hands against his temples and concentrated with everything he had. Yet no matter how hard he tried, there was nothing, not a single memory, not even a faint clue about who he was. His breathing grew heavier, his chest tightened with frustration. Then suddenly, a wave of pain surged through his head. He grabbed it instinctively, his fingers digging into his hair as the pounding intensified. It felt as though something inside his mind was trying to break free, but every effort only made the pain worse. Unable to bear it any longer, he cried out. The room fell silent. Robert Morris immediately stepped closer, concern written across his face. "Stop," he said calmly. "Don't force yourself. Your memory will return when it's ready." The man slowly relaxed his grip, though the pain still echoed faintly in his head. Breathing hard, he leaned back against the bed, realizing that chasing memories he couldn't reach would only leave him exhausted. For now, all he could do was wait. I looked toward the man standing beside me. He smiled warmly before introducing himself. "My name is Robert Morris." Just as he finished speaking, the other man stepped forward. "I'm Dr. Richard." His calm voice carried a reassuring confidence. "Now, take it easy," Dr. Richard said. "You've been through a serious ordeal." He pulled a chair closer to the bed and sat down, studying me carefully. "You don't need to pressure yourself to remember everything right now. Memory doesn't always return all at once. Sometimes it comes back in small pieces." I listened in silence. My head still throbbed faintly from the pain, and I was afraid that trying again would only make it worse. Robert Morris gently untied the straps that had been securing my wrists and ankles to the bed. As circulation returned, I slowly flexed my fingers, then carefully moved my arms and legs. They felt weak and stiff, but at least I could move them. For the first time, I felt a small sense of relief. Just then, the door opened. The same nurse who had been in the room earlier walked back inside, carrying a tray. A warm smile spread across her face when she saw that I was awake. "Good morning," she said cheerfully. The room, which had felt tense only moments before, suddenly seemed a little brighter. Even though I still had no idea who I was or how I had ended up there, the kindness of the people around me made the fear feel just a little easier to bear. The nurse set the tray down beside the bed and smiled politely before leaving the room. As soon as the door closed behind her, Robert Morris turned toward me. "You should get some rest," he said. "You've been through more than you realize." The two men exchanged a brief glance, then quietly walked toward the door. Before stepping outside, Dr. Richard looked back at me one last time. "If anything comes back to you," he said calmly, "even the smallest detail, let us know." I gave a slight nod. The room fell silent after they left. I leaned back against the pillow, staring at the ceiling. My mind was empty, as if someone had erased my entire past. I couldn't remember my name, my family, or even where I came from. It was a terrifying feeling, being alive, yet having no idea who you truly were. A little while later, the door opened again. A middle-aged man entered the room wearing a neatly pressed suit. He carried himself with quiet confidence, as though he belonged there. Robert Morris and Dr. Richard followed him inside. The stranger walked over to my bedside and looked at me thoughtfully. "So," he said with a faint smile, "it seems you're finally awake." There was something about his voice that made me feel he already knew far more about me than I knew about myself. I searched his face for recognition, but once again, nothing surfaced from the empty silence inside my mind. After that, the man asked me a few more questions, but I still couldn't remember anything. Soon afterward, Robert Morris and Dr. Richard stepped out of the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts. To be continued. Dear readers, if you've enjoyed the story so far, please leave a comment and let me know what you think. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for reading. The end. For now. Special thanks. Dear valued readers, first of all, I want to sincerely thank each and every one of you. Your love and support mean more to me than words can express. It's because of your encouragement that I found the motivation to write this story. I also owe a heartfelt thank you to everyone who offered feedback, pointed out mistakes, and shared thoughtful suggestions. Your comments helped shape this journey, and I truly appreciate every one of them. Writing a novel is never the work of just one person. Behind every story is a community of readers whose encouragement inspires the writer to keep going. Every message, every comment, and every kind word gave me the confidence to continue. I'm especially grateful to those who stayed with the story from beginning to end, patiently following each chapter and supporting it along the way. Your trust and enthusiasm have been my greatest motivation. Thank you once again for being part of this journey. I hope we'll meet again in another story very soon. My name is Jonathan. The words echoed in my mind, but they felt strangely distant, as if they belonged to someone else. The man standing beside my bed studied my face carefully, searching for any sign of recognition. "You really don't remember anything?" he asked. I slowly shook my head. He let out a quiet sigh before pulling a chair closer and sitting down. "My name is Inspector Daniel Carter," he said. "I've been investigating the incident that brought you here." I listened without saying a word. "You were found unconscious after a violent confrontation," he continued. "When the authorities arrived, everyone else at the scene was gone. You were the only survivor." His words sent a chill through me. "I was hoping you could help identify the people involved," he said. "Even the smallest detail could make a difference, but if your memory is truly gone, there isn't much we can do right now." I lowered my eyes, frustrated by the emptiness in my mind. "What happens now?" I finally asked. "For now," Inspector Carter replied, "your recovery is the priority. The doctors believe your memories may return over time. Until then, we'll continue our investigation from every possible angle." I nodded silently. Even though I still had no answers about my past, one thing was becoming clear: whatever had happened before I woke up in that hospital room was far more dangerous than I had ever imagined. And sooner or later, the truth would find its way back to me. The inspector continued speaking. "We searched every missing person report we could find," he said, "but no one matching your description has been reported missing. It's as if you appeared out of nowhere." His words only deepened the mystery. I closed my eyes, hoping that if I searched hard enough, something, anything, would come back. Nothing. No faces, no names, no memories, only an endless emptiness. Then, without warning, a faint sound echoed somewhere in the back of my mind. A voice. Soft. Distant. Almost impossible to recognize. I tried to focus on it, but it slipped away before I could make sense of the words. It felt like a forgotten dream disappearing the moment you wake up. I opened my eyes again. The inspector was watching me carefully. "Did you remember something?" he asked. I heard a voice," I said slowly. "But I don't know whose it was." "What did it say?" "I couldn't make it out." He nodded thoughtfully. "That's actually a good sign," he replied. Fragments of memory often return before the complete picture does. Your mind may still be trying to reconnect the pieces. His explanation gave me a small glimmer of hope. I looked up at him. If no one knows who I am, I asked quietly, then who am I? For a brief moment, the room fell completely silent. The inspector didn't have an answer. And somehow, that silence was more frightening. I don't even know what crime I'm supposed to have committed. How small, contact us immediately. I will, I replied. He gave me one last look before leaving the room. Silence settled in once again. Outside the window, the afternoon sun stretched across the sky, but inside my mind there was only darkness. Hours passed. The nurse returned to check on me, making sure I was comfortable before quietly leaving again. I closed my eyes, hoping sleep might bring answers that my waking mind could not. Instead, a single image flashed through the darkness: a road, rain falling, bright headlights cutting through the night, then a deafening crash. I jerked awake, breathing hard. The vision vanished as quickly as it had appeared, leaving only the echo of fear behind. It wasn't a complete memory, but it was the first real clue my mind had given me, and deep down I knew it was only the beginning. The stranger studied me for a long moment before asking quietly, "So, who do you think tried to kill you? Do you have any idea who would want you dead?" I shook my head. "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I don't even know who I am. How could I possibly know who my enemies are?" He nodded, as if he had expected that answer. "All right," he said. "Then let me ask you something else. What religion do you follow? Are you Muslim or something else?" I looked at him for a moment before replying. "Life and death are in God's hands," I said calmly. "I am a Muslim, and I believe that whatever happens is by His will. I only pray that He guides me through this." The room fell silent. The inspector exchanged a brief glance with Robert Morris before speaking again. "Until your memory returns," he said, "we'll continue investigating from our side. If anything comes back to you, anything at all, you must tell us immediately." "I will." He gave a slight nod. For now, there was nothing more to ask. The questions surrounding my past remained unanswered, but one thing was becoming painfully clear. Someone had wanted me dead. And until I discovered who that person was, I could never truly be safe. Dot. As the inspector finished speaking, he and Robert Morris stood and quietly left the room. Once the door closed behind them, I was alone again. The silence felt heavier than ever. I stared out the window, searching the empty horizon, hoping that somehow a familiar face or forgotten memory would appear. Nothing. Every attempt to remember ended the same way, with an empty mind and an aching heart. I lowered my head and whispered to myself, "My God, who am I?" The question echoed through the room, but no answer came. If I wanted to uncover the truth, I realized I couldn't simply wait for my memories to return. Somehow, I would have to search for the answers myself. My eyes drifted around the room, taking in every detail for the first time. The hospital felt unfamiliar. The people around me were strangers. Even my own reflection in the window looked like someone I had never met before. I had survived whatever had happened to me. Now I had only one purpose left: to uncover my past, to find out who had tried to erase me, and to discover the truth, no matter where it led. The next morning, I was finally well enough to leave the hospital. Freedom should have felt comforting. Instead, it felt terrifying. I stepped outside with no name I could truly recognize, no home to return to, and no idea where my life had begun. The street stretched out before me like a map belonging to someone else. Then, without warning, a memory flickered through my mind. A voice, soft, distant, yet unmistakably familiar. "You'll find the answers you're searching for." I froze. Those words echoed in my head as if they had been spoken only moments ago. Who had said them? And what were they trying to tell me? I looked around, searching every face in the crowd, convinced that someone nearby might be connected to the voice. But everyone walked past me without a second glance. The city moved on as if nothing had happened. Standing there alone, I realized something important. If the truth wasn't going to come to me, then I would have to go out and find it myself. The voice in my mind refused to fade. It felt familiar, close enough to recognize, yet still beyond my reach. I had no destination, no plan, and no one waiting for me. So I simply started walking through the unfamiliar streets, hoping that somewhere along the way, another piece of my past would reveal itself. After several minutes, I noticed an elderly man sitting alone on a bench outside a small cafe. As I passed by, he suddenly looked up at me. Our eyes met. For a brief moment, it felt as though he recognized me. "Excuse me," he called. I stopped and turned toward him. "Yes?" He studied my face carefully before asking, "Have we met before?" I hesitated. I honestly don't know." The old man frowned slightly. "That's strange," he murmured. "For a second, I could have sworn I knew you." A flicker of hope sparked inside me. "You recognize me?" I asked quickly. He shook his head. "Not exactly, it's just a feeling. Your face seems familiar, but I can't remember where I've seen you." Even so, those words were enough to keep my hope alive. At last, someone had looked at me as if I belonged somewhere. And maybe, just maybe, this chance encounter was the first real step toward uncovering the life I had lost. "Wait," the old man said. "I can't remember exactly where we met, but I'm certain it wasn't here. We crossed paths somewhere else." His words sent a wave of excitement through me. I leaned forward, eager for anything that might help unlock my past. "Please," I said, "try to remember." The old man closed his eyes for a moment, searching his memory. Finally, he shook his head. "No, I still can't place it." The hope that had begun to grow inside me faltered once again. "My name is Jonathan," I said after a brief silence. "At least, that's the name I've been given. I woke up in a hospital with no memory of who I really am. I'm trying to find out where I came from." The old man's expression softened. "My son," he said gently, "if that's truly what happened, then don't lose hope. God has a way of returning what is meant for us, even if it takes time." His words brought me an unexpected sense of comfort. I thanked him and stood to leave. As I turned away, he called after me one last time. "If we really have met before, then fate will bring us together again." I looked back and gave him a grateful smile. For the first time since losing my memory, I felt that I wasn't completely alone. Somewhere out there, the truth still existed, and I had no intention of giving up until I found it. "Don't lose hope," the old man said with a reassuring smile. "The truth has a way of revealing itself when the time is right." I nodded, grateful for his kindness. Then a question suddenly crossed my mind. "Do you remember," I asked carefully, "whether the people with me ever mentioned my name?" The old man thought for a moment before answering. "No," he said, "I don't remember hearing anyone call you by name. But I do remember one thing." I leaned forward immediately. "What is it?" "They seemed afraid," he replied. "Not of you, but of someone else. It felt like they believed someone was following them." His words sent a chill through me. Someone was following us. Someone dangerous enough to frighten the people around me. The old man continued. "I didn't understand what was happening at the time. I thought it was none of my business. But after hearing what you've told me today, I can't stop thinking about it." I fell silent. Every new clue seemed to raise even more questions. If someone had really been hunting us, then my lost memories weren't just the key to my identity, they might also explain why someone wanted me dead. The old man placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Be careful," he said quietly. "I have a feeling your journey is only beginning." "My son," the old man said gently, "the world is often much smaller than we think. People cross paths for a reason. If fate has brought us together today, then perhaps it intends for us to meet again." I listened quietly. There was a calm confidence in his voice that made his words feel sincere. I don't have many answers for you, he continued. But I do believe one thing: running from the truth never makes it disappear. I nodded. He was right. No matter how painful my past might be, I couldn't spend the rest of my life hiding from it. The old man looked at me thoughtfully and asked, "Do you have anywhere to go?" The question caught me off guard. I realized I didn't. No home, no family I could remember, no place where I truly belonged. I lowered my eyes before quietly answering, "No, not yet." He smiled kindly. "Then don't lose faith," he said. "God always opens a door for those who keep moving forward. Sometimes the path appears only after you've taken the first step." His words stayed with me as I thanked him and walked away. For the first time since waking up in that hospital, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long while. Hope. It was small and fragile, but it was enough to keep me moving toward the truth that was waiting somewhere ahead. I looked at him with gratitude. "Sir," I said, "you've already shown me more kindness than I ever expected. I don't know how to repay you." The old man smiled warmly. "You don't owe me anything," he replied. "Helping someone in need is never a burden. Besides, your passport was found with your belongings. That may become the first real clue to your identity." My heart skipped a beat. "A passport?" "Yes," he said. "The authorities have it now. Once the investigation allows it, they'll return it to you. It may answer many of the questions you've been asking." I took a deep breath. "So, what should I do until then?" The old man didn't hesitate. "Keep moving forward," he said. "Don't let fear control your life. Every person faces hardships, but those hardships don't define who they are. Trust in God, be patient, and when the right time comes, the truth will reveal itself." His words settled deep within me. For the first time, I felt as though I had a direction. The road ahead was still uncertain, and countless questions remained unanswered. But now I knew one thing for certain. I would keep searching until I uncovered the truth about my past. No matter where that journey led, the old man kindly offered me a place to stay for the night. "It's getting late," he said. "You shouldn't wander the streets with nowhere to go." I accepted his offer without hesitation. By the next morning, he had already arranged something for me. "I've spoken with a friend of mine," he explained. "He owns a small bookstore and could use an extra pair of hands. It's not much, but it'll give you a place to start until you get back on your feet." I was overwhelmed by his generosity. "Thank you," I said sincerely. "I don't know how I can ever repay you." He simply smiled. "You can repay me by rebuilding your life." Later that day, he walked me to the bookstore. The owner, a kind, middle-aged man named Michael, welcomed me with a friendly handshake after hearing my situation. "If our mutual friend trusts you," Michael said, "then that's all I need to know. You're welcome here." For the first time since losing my memory, I felt a small sense of stability. The bookstore was quiet and inviting, filled with the comforting scent of old pages and polished wood. Rows of books stretched from floor to ceiling, creating a peaceful atmosphere unlike anything I had experienced since waking up in the hospital. It wasn't the life I remembered, but until I discovered who I really was. It was a place where I could begin again. The days passed quietly. One evening, after closing the bookstore, I headed back to the small room where I had been staying. The streets were unusually quiet. As I walked beneath the dim streetlights, I couldn't shake the strange feeling that someone was watching me. I stopped. Silence. No footsteps, no voices. After a few seconds, I convinced myself it was only my imagination and continued walking. Then I heard it. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, following me. My heart began to race. I glanced over my shoulder, but the street behind me appeared empty. Still, the uneasy feeling refused to disappear. I quickened my pace. The footsteps quickened too. A chill ran down my spine. Without thinking, I turned sharply into a narrow side street, hoping to lose whoever was behind me. The alley was dark and deserted. I pressed myself against the wall, holding my breath as I listened. The footsteps grew louder, closer, closer still. Then, they stopped. Complete silence settled over the alley. I remained frozen, barely daring to breathe, waiting to see who or what would appear around the corner. Working in the bookstore didn't restore my memories, but it gave my restless mind something to focus on. Every morning I unlocked the doors, arranged the shelves, and greeted the steady stream of customers who wandered in throughout the day. It was peaceful. People came looking for stories, knowledge, or simply a quiet place to spend an hour. Watching them reminded me that everyone carried a life of their own, one filled with memories, dreams, and purpose. I couldn't help wondering what mine had been. One afternoon, while organizing a shelf near the back of the store, my eyes fell on a thick, weathered book. The moment my fingers touched its cover, an unexpected sensation rushed through me. A sharp pulse shot through my head. For an instant, fragmented images flashed before my eyes. A dark room, someone shouting, the sound of footsteps racing down a corridor. Then, silence. I staggered backward, gripping the shelf to keep myself from falling. The vision disappeared as suddenly as it had come. My breathing grew heavy. It wasn't enough to reveal the truth, but it confirmed something important. Books, places, objects. Some of them were triggering pieces of my lost memories. Maybe my past wasn't hidden as deeply as I had feared. Maybe all I needed was the right key to unlock it. A wave of relief washed over me. Whoever had been following me was gone, or at least that was what I wanted to believe. I stepped cautiously out of the alley and hurried back toward the main street, refusing to look over my shoulder again. When I finally reached my room later that night, I locked the door behind me and leaned against it, trying to calm my racing heart. Sleep didn't come easily. My mind kept replaying the footsteps, the empty alley, and the feeling that unseen eyes had been watching my every move. Whether the threat had been real or only my imagination, one thing was now impossible to ignore. My life was still in danger. If someone truly was searching for me, then staying in one place for too long would only make me an easier target. Finding the truth about my past was no longer just about discovering who I was. It had become a matter of survival. To be continued. The end. Dear readers, thank you for your love and support throughout this journey. Last night, I stayed up late to complete this novel, and today, I'm grateful to finally share it with you. Writing this story has been a memorable experience. I worked on it as quickly as I could because I wanted to bring it to you without making you wait too long. If there are any mistakes or shortcomings, I sincerely ask for your understanding. Your encouragement, comments, and support have meant everything to me. They gave me the motivation to keep writing and bring this story to its conclusion. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for reading all the way to the end. I hope this story entertained you, kept you engaged, and left you with memories that will stay with you long after the final page. Until we meet again in another adventure. Take care, and thank you for being part of this journey. The silence around me was suddenly broken by a voice. May God protect you. I turned toward the sound and saw a man standing a short distance away, watching me with a serious expression. He stepped closer. I've been looking for you, he said. Every instinct told me to stay alert. Who are you? I asked cautiously. He glanced around before lowering his voice. This isn't the right place to talk. There are people watching. My pulse quickened. What do you mean? I mean your life is still in danger, he replied. The people who came after you haven't given up. If they realize you've regained consciousness, they'll come after you again. A chill ran through me. So what am I supposed to do? For now, he said, trust no one too quickly. Not everyone who seems friendly is on your side. His warning echoed in my mind. Before I could ask another question, he looked over my shoulder, his expression suddenly changing. Someone else was approaching. Without another word, the stranger turned and disappeared into the crowd, leaving me standing there with more questions than answers. Who was he? How did he know about my past? And if his warning was true, then the danger I thought I'd escaped was only just beginning. I couldn't ignore the warning. If someone really was hunting me, then every step I took from this point forward mattered. The next morning, I went to the bookstore as usual, trying not to draw attention to myself. I acted as though nothing had happened, but my eyes constantly scanned the street outside. Every unfamiliar face made me wonder whether they were simply passing by or watching me. Hours slipped by without incident. Then, just before closing, something caught my attention. A man was standing across the street. He wasn't browsing the nearby shops. He wasn't talking to anyone. He was just standing there, staring in my direction. The moment our eyes met, he quickly turned away. My heartbeat accelerated. Was he the same person who had followed me the night before? Or was I allowing fear to cloud my judgment? I stepped outside to get a better look. By the time I reached the sidewalk, he was gone. The street was crowded with people, but the mysterious stranger had disappeared without a trace. I stood there, searching the crowd, realizing that whoever was watching me knew exactly how to stay hidden. And that meant one thing. I wasn't imagining the danger anymore. It had become real. I spent the rest of the evening unable to shake the feeling that someone was watching me. That night, I barely slept. The stranger's warning echoed over and over in my mind, refusing to let me rest. By morning, I had made a decision. I couldn't keep living in fear. If I wanted answers, I had to start looking for them myself. As I walked toward the bookstore, I stayed alert, carefully watching every street and every passerby. Then I noticed him. The same man. He was standing across the road again. This time there was no doubt. The moment he realized I had seen him, he turned and walked away. I didn't hesitate. I followed him. He moved quickly through the crowded streets, weaving between pedestrians as though he already knew the city by heart. I fought to keep him in sight, but every time I thought I was getting closer, he slipped farther ahead. My heart pounded. I couldn't let him disappear, not when he might be the only person who could lead me to the truth. He turned into a narrow side street. I rushed after him. But when I reached the corner, the alley was empty. He had vanished. I stood there, breathing heavily, staring at the deserted passageway in disbelief. It was as though he had disappeared into thin air. Whoever this man was, he clearly knew how to stay hidden. And somehow, I knew this wouldn't be the last time our paths crossed. Where did he disappear to? I looked around in disbelief, searching every corner of the alley. There was nowhere he could have gone. The walls on both sides were solid, and the passage ended in a dead end. There was no obvious escape route. Yet the man had vanished. If I hadn't seen him with my own eyes just seconds earlier, I would have thought I'd imagined the entire chase. I stood there for a moment, trying to calm my breathing. Then a realization struck me. Whoever this man was, he knew the area far better than I did. And if he had gone to such lengths to avoid being seen, then he clearly had something to hide. Just as I was about to leave, a faint movement caught my eye. Tucked between two old wooden crates near the wall was a small folded piece of paper. I hesitated before picking it up. Someone had left it there on purpose. Slowly, I unfolded it. Only one sentence was written across the page. "You've only begun. Your real test is still ahead. Never trust everyone who claims to help you." I read the message again. Never trust everyone. The words refused to leave my mind. If someone had gone through the trouble of warning me, then the danger surrounding me was far greater than I had imagined. I carefully folded the note and slipped it into my pocket. From that moment on, I knew I couldn't afford to be careless. I walked out of the alley, constantly checking over my shoulder. Every stranger I passed suddenly seemed suspicious. Every unexpected glance made me wonder whether I was being watched. By the time I returned to the bookstore, Michael immediately noticed the tension on my face. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said with a concerned smile. "It's nothing," I replied, forcing myself to sound calm, but he could tell I wasn't telling the whole truth. "You know," he said quietly, "if something's bothering you, you don't have to face it alone." His kindness caught me off guard. For a moment, I considered showing him the note, but the warning echoed through my mind once again. Never trust everyone. I kept the paper hidden in my pocket and simply thanked him. Until I knew who I could truly rely on, I decided to keep my discoveries to myself. The more I thought about it, the more uneasy I became. If the mysterious note was telling the truth, then I couldn't blindly trust anyone, not even the people who had helped me. That realization weighed heavily on me. Later that evening, after the bookstore had closed, I found myself walking back toward the same alley where the stranger had disappeared. Something kept pulling me there. I couldn't explain it, but I felt as though another clue might be waiting for me. The alley was silent. I searched every corner, every doorway, and every shadow, but there was nothing unusual to be found. Just as I was about to leave, a faint sound echoed behind me. Footsteps. I turned instantly. No one. My heart pounded as I scanned the empty passage. Then, from somewhere nearby, a familiar voice broke the silence. You're asking the wrong questions. I spun toward the sound, but once again there was no one there. The voice had vanished as mysteriously as it had appeared. I stood frozen, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Whoever was guiding me clearly knew far more about my past than I did. And with every new clue, one truth became harder to ignore. This wasn't just a search for my lost identity anymore. It had become a dangerous game, and someone else was already several moves ahead. The voice had barely faded when I heard it again. This time, it came from behind me. I turned sharply. A figure stood at the far end of the alley, hidden beneath the dim glow of a streetlight. Without thinking, I ran toward him. The stranger glanced back, then immediately took off. I chased him through the narrow streets, refusing to let him disappear again. He was fast. Every time I thought I was closing the distance, he slipped farther ahead, weaving through the empty roads as though he knew exactly where he was going. Then, without warning, he stopped. I slowed to a cautious walk. The stranger remained still, his back turned toward me. Finally, in a calm voice, he spoke. You shouldn't have come here. A chill ran through me. Who are you? I demanded. Why are you following me? He let out a quiet sigh but didn't answer. Instead, he slowly turned his head just enough for me to catch a glimpse of his face. Before I could see him clearly, he disappeared into the darkness once again. I rushed forward, but it was too late. He was gone. Standing alone in the silent alley, I realized I was closer than ever to the truth. Yet somehow, it had never felt farther away. I stood there for several long moments, staring into the darkness where the stranger had vanished. There was no sign of him, no footsteps, no movement, only silence. Realizing I wasn't going to find him, I finally turned and made my way back toward the road. By the time I reached my room, exhaustion had caught up with me. I locked the door, checked the windows twice, and sat on the edge of the bed, replaying everything that had happened. Who was that man? Why did he keep appearing only to disappear again? And why did it feel as though he knew me better than I knew myself? Sleep came slowly that night. When morning arrived, I woke with the uneasy feeling that my life had changed once again. The mysterious stranger, the warning, the note, and the chase through the alley were all connected. I just couldn't see how. As I headed toward the bookstore, one thought stayed with me. The answers weren't going to come looking for me. If I wanted the truth, I would have to keep following every clue, no matter how dangerous the path became. You've already become an important part of this story, he said. But I still don't know whether I should trust you. I looked at him quietly. You don't have to trust me, I replied. Trust isn't given because of words. It's earned. He remained silent for a moment before asking, There's something I've been wondering. If you've really lost your memory, why haven't you gone to the authorities to reclaim your passport? I sighed. I will, I answered, but not yet. If someone is truly hunting me, then showing up and revealing my identity too soon could put me in even greater danger. The old man nodded thoughtfully. That makes sense, he admitted. Then he looked at me with a serious expression. So what's your plan now? I didn't hesitate. My only goal, I said firmly, is to uncover the truth. No matter where it leads, I won't stop until I find out who I really am and why someone wants me dead. I'll tell you everything, I said. But first, there's something you need to explain. The old man looked at me carefully. Go ahead. If you're really trying to help me, I asked, then why did you hide the truth for so long? A faint smile crossed his face. Because I wasn't sure you were ready. His answer caught me off guard. Ready for what? For the truth, he replied. The moment you learn who you really are, your life will never be the same again. A heavy silence settled between us. Then he reached into his coat and pulled out an old passport. He placed it on the table in front of me. This belongs to you. I stared at it in disbelief. The photograph was unmistakably mine. My hands trembled as I slowly picked it up. For the first time since losing my memory, I was holding undeniable proof that my forgotten identity had been real all along. The old man watched my reaction closely. Take your time, he said quietly. What comes next will change everything. After dinner, I returned with the old man to the place where I had found the mysterious stranger. The narrow alley was deserted now. There wasn't a single person in sight, and the silence felt heavier than before, as if the place itself had swallowed every trace of what had happened. The old man asked quietly, "Does any of this feel familiar to you, even the slightest memory?" I closed my eyes and tried. Nothing. No clear memory returned, but as I stood there, an odd sensation washed over me. It wasn't a memory I could see, it was more like a feeling buried deep inside me. Fear, urgency, as though I had stood in this exact place before, waiting for something or someone. I opened my eyes and looked at him. "I don't remember," I admitted, "but this place feels strangely familiar." The old man gave a slow nod. "Sometimes," he said, "memories don't return as pictures. They return as emotions. Your mind may have forgotten, but your heart still remembers." "I can't remember," I said, staring into the empty alley. The old man nodded. "No," he replied softly, "you probably can't. But places have a way of holding on to memories, even when people can't." He walked slowly toward the far end of the alley. I followed close behind. When we reached the end, he stopped in front of an old brick wall and studied it carefully. Then he reached out and pressed his hand against a section of the wall. I frowned. "There isn't anything there," I said. "We can't go through a solid wall." "Not anymore," he answered. "But there used to be." He motioned for me to come closer. As I stepped beside him, he pointed toward the weathered bricks. At first I couldn't see anything unusual. Then as I looked more carefully, I noticed faint marks hidden beneath years of dust and age. They weren't random. Someone had carved symbols into the wall long ago. A strange feeling settled over me. I had seen these symbols before. I just couldn't remember where. The old man watched my expression and smiled faintly. "Your memory is beginning to wake up," he said. "Don't force it. Let it come back on its own." "Look carefully," the old man said. "This passport is the key." I took it from his hands and examined it closely. The moment my eyes fell on the name printed inside, a shock ran through me. The name was unfamiliar. It wasn't the name I had been expecting. I looked up at the old man. This can't be right." "It is," he replied calmly. "There are still many truths hidden from you, and this is only one of them." I stood there in stunned silence. Then another memory flashed through my mind. It was brief. A locked room, a heavy iron door, and someone standing on the other side, calling my name. The vision disappeared as quickly as it had come. The old man noticed the change in my expression. "Did you remember something?" "A little," I admitted. "Not much, just fragments, but it felt real." He nodded, as if he had expected exactly that. "Good," he said. "Your memories are returning one piece at a time. That's the way they should. But it's possible," the old man continued, "that another memory could return at any moment, and when it does, you'll be able to identify the real enemy." I nodded slowly. "So you really believe that?" He smiled. "Soon enough, you'll believe it too." Then he looked at me with a seriousness that made the air feel heavier. "Son," he said quietly, "you're not an ordinary man. The things you've experienced, most people never would." I waited, saying nothing. "There are still many truths I can't reveal," he continued. "Not because I don't trust you, but because the time isn't right. If I tell you everything now, it could interfere with the memories trying to find their way back." He paused for a moment before continuing. "But one thing is certain." His voice grew firmer. "If you recover every memory hidden inside your mind, you'll finally understand why you came to Europe, and why so many people are determined to keep the truth buried." The old man looked at me and said, "Never forget this. A person's greatest enemy is often not someone else. It's their own fear." I thought about his words for a long moment. "I've always believed," I replied, "that courage means never being afraid. But now I realize fear has followed me every step of this journey. The old man smiled gently. Everyone feels fear, he said. The difference is that some people let fear control them, while others learn to control it. His words struck something deep inside me. For the first time, I wondered whether I had spent my entire life running, not just from dangerous people, but from the truth about myself. The old man seemed to read my thoughts. Son, he said quietly, the road ahead will be harder than anything you've faced so far. But remember this, every answer you're searching for already exists within you. You simply have to find the courage to uncover it. I lowered my head, letting his words sink in. Then a question that had been haunting me finally slipped out. If that's true, then why does it feel like someone is always one step ahead of me? The old man studied my face carefully. This time before answering, he hesitated. The old man noticed the question in my eyes. He looked at me for a long moment before speaking. There are no secrets hidden from you, he said quietly. The truth is, you've simply refused to see it. His words landed harder than I expected. Was I really the one avoiding the truth? The old man smiled faintly as he watched the realization spread across my face. Do you know, he asked, what frightened you the most